Thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. As Andy said, my name's Bernard Fawcett, and I'm one of the international consultants here at EAL Education, and I work with schools across Central, East and Southeast Asia. So just to sort of have a think about the purpose of the session today, we've got some objectives which I'll just run through very, very quickly. So during the session today, hopefully we're going to dispel some of the myths around standardised assessment. We're also going to have a look at some of the different standardised assessments that are offered by us here at EAL Education. And then we're also going to have a look at how some of the top performing international schools around the world use data from our assessments to make a real impact in the classroom. So just to talk a little bit about who we are, EAL Education's been around for about 40 years developing robust tests for UK schools. We're now working with over 10,000 schools in over 100 countries around the world. We work with research organisations like King's College, University of Cambridge and the Australian Council for Education Research. And we partner with a lot of the professional organisations, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, such as Phobia, ESIS, BSME and COBIS, to ensure that our assessments are rigorous. Over the last 5 years, we've delivered over 10 million tests. And in terms of the teachers, that means that that's over 500 million questions that teachers haven't had to mark themselves. So our mission at EAL is to work in partnership with schools to support the work that they do with their students. So students are the most important thing and why most of us are working in education. So we help teachers to understand their students better and to give teachers what we call a 360-degree view or whole student view. And we do that by providing assessments that support teachers' understanding of students' ability, such as our Cognitive Ability Test version 4 or CAT4. We also provide assessments of attainment, and we have assessments like the progress test, baseline tests for reception, and reading and spelling tests, NGRT and NGST. We also have assessments that look at the barriers to learning, like the Pupil's Attitude to Self and School Survey, or PASS, and we also have a number of diagnostic tools to identify learning support needs. Now, coming from an area of the UK which is well known for agriculture, an analogy that was often used by teachers when I myself was teaching was, it doesn't matter how many times you measure the wheat, it doesn't make it grow any faster. Now, this is the first myth that I'd like to bust. Without assessment, how do we know what we're doing is working? Teachers will assess all the time, so why do we need standardised assessment? Well, without standardised assessment, how do we know what one teacher is doing compares to a teacher in the classroom next door, or a teacher in the school up the road, or any school around the world? This is where standardised assessment can help, so we can do that comparison, so we know how our students are doing when compared to students around the world. It's also important to think about assessing the right things. If we look at the nutrients in the soil, we might have a better understanding of how well the wheat's going to grow. If we look at the things that support our students and we can understand how they're learning and what they know, we can support them better. So assessment of learning can be important for different things like certificating students, demonstrating to our stakeholders such as our parents and owners that we're doing a good job, demonstrating to government bodies and accreditation organisations that we offer quality teaching and learning. But assessment should improve learning, not just measure it. So if we focus on assessment for learning, we can actually make the teaching and learning better for our students. Now, I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with the work of people like John Hattie, Dylan William, and their research into what actually works well in the classroom. This is a diagram which shows some of the findings from some research which has been carried out by the Education Endowment Foundation in the UK. And this comparison here is comparing the cost of a teaching and learning strategy with its effectiveness. And you can see from this that two of the most cost-effective strategies are giving the students feedback and helping to understand their own metacognition. And if we can support those two strategies with effective assessment for learning, then we're on to a winner. So thinking about metacognition, let's first of all take a look at our cognitive ability test, or CAT4. It's an assessment of students' developed abilities, and it can be used as an indicator of their academic potential. Most international schools use the digital version of the test, which is available from 6 years old through to 17 plus. Because it's digital, the results are very quick to get back, so it's very, very easy to use. It's curriculum neutral, so here's another of the myths that I'd like to bust. Many schools think that because GL was originally based in the UK, that our assessments only work for UK curriculum schools. Well, it doesn't actually matter what curriculum's being studied, and we've many schools that are not following the UK national curriculum who use CAT4. We do have indicators to support possible outcomes in IGCSE and A-level, but also for IB and CBSE. So how can the CAT4 be used? So it can be used to identify academic potential. It can help the teacher understand how a student thinks. It can be used to highlight gaps between the student's ability and their actual attainment. And it can be used to provide feedback to the teacher, to the student and to parents. Many schools use it for setting appropriate targets. And we also have many international schools that use CAT4 as part of their admissions testing. So what does CAT4 actually assess? Okay, so it looks at verbal reasoning skills, which is thinking with words. It also looks at quantitative reasoning, which is thinking with numbers, non-verbal reasoning, which is thinking with shape and pattern, and spatial thinking, which is being able to visualize the shapes and patterns in 3 dimensions. For the youngest students, the test's in just 2 parts of around about 32 minutes. And then for the older students, the test is in 3 parts of around 40 to 45 minutes. So what's a standardised test? So we've taken the results of CAT4 from thousands of students, and we've plotted their results to get what you see here, the normal distribution curve or bell curve. We can see that the majority of the students who took the test got a score in the middle, but there are some more able students who will get higher scores and some students with lower scores who may need more learning support. A standard age score of 100 is very typical, so we can see very quickly if a student is typical for their age when compared with students of the same age down to their age in months. We also use standard 9s or stay 9s to look at the scores from CAT4, and this is another quick way of being able to see whether the student is typical. Okay, if the student's score is in stay 9s 4, 5 and 6, they're very typical for their age. But a standard age score above 119 or stay 9 8 could indicate that a student is gifted and talented. A score below 81 or in stay 9 2 could indicate that the student is actually in need of more general learning support to access the curriculum. Now, feedback from teachers shows us that one of the most useful things that they find from the CAT4 reports is the implications for teaching and learning. And this is a narrative that helps teachers to personalise the teaching and learning experience for students by understanding better how they learn and particular strategies which might work well for them in the classroom. Now, if the curriculum is taught in English and the teacher is asking a question in English, when the student can't respond, how does the teacher know if it's a problem with their understanding of the subject or a problem with their understanding of the English? So verbal deficit is something which is a good indicator from the CAT4 results, which will help you to understand whether the student needs more English support. The non-verbal reasoning score is a good indicator of the student's ability, and it's not affected by their first language. So if the difference between their non-verbal and their verbal reasoning score is quite big, then it means that their English is lagging behind their actual ability. This is a better indicator than just looking at a low verbal reasoning score, because that might be affected by broader learning support needs. So looking at this difference or verbal deficit between the verbal reasoning score and the non-verbal reasoning score is a good indicator that the student needs that EAL support. Now, this profile, which is on the screen now, is very, very typical of a very bright EAL student in an international school. They may appear to be coping, but actually, if we could support their English development, their success across all subjects, for example, science, could be greatly improved. So you can see from this, the score for verbal reasoning is down at 90, but the scores for the other three reasoning scores are very, very high, and this indicates that the student is very bright, but their English needs to be brought up to the same level as their other understanding. So if you'd like to read more about this, I'd recommend reading our case study by Nicola Lambros, which talks about different strategies of working with these students. Teachers often ask me as well, what do we do once we've identified our EAL students using the CAT4 test? So we've done quite a bit of work over the last year, and we've recently launched our new flowchart, assessment flowchart, which gives some support in making assessment decisions around literacy. So if you've got your CAT4 results, this shows you next steps, and there's also next steps of using our new group reading test, which can be used up to 3 times a year to track reading comprehension progress. We've also got a number of other diagnostic tools that can be used to further investigate issues such as dyslexia. So the flowchart, which is available on our website now, guides you through that process, and actually you can just see the top of the flowchart here with the early stages of it, and there's some other stages further down which talk about other diagnostics that you can run. And again, if you would like to find out more about using the new group reading test and how that can be used to evaluate the impact of the interventions that you're doing with EAL students, we have a case study on our website from the Edron Academy in Mexico City, which talks about how they've used NGRT to measure the impact of their strategies that they're putting in place to develop their English language. So this example on the screen now is another CAT4 profile for a student who is actually struggling with language as well, but there are actually broader learning support needs for this student. So this particular profile is typical of a student who's got those broader learning support needs, and this would indicate that there's a need for further investigation. So in 2019, last year, we launched our new online assessment for dyslexia through our platform called GL Ready. So this provides further assessments which can be used to look at whether the student has dyslexia. And we also have a package of other diagnostic tools which are available individually, and we also provide those as part of an SEN assessment toolkit, which can help to give a better understanding of students' barriers to learning. So just to have a look at a few Cat4 profiles then. So some of these we've already looked at. So student A is the profile that we've just looked at. So this is a student who is going to benefit from some more general learning support. They're going to need, not just the English language support, but support for other types of learning as well. Student B is a very able EAL student whose level of English is good. So you can see there that their verbal reasoning score is 105. So that would put them above average when compared to a native English speaker in the UK. But their ability is very high. So this is an example of a student who may not be getting English language support because they seem to be coping with their English. But in actual fact, if we supported them further with their English language skills, then we could get their English to the same level as their ability, and they're going to start achieving at the highest level across all of the subjects. Student C shows a strength for spatial thinking, so they may need to be stretched and challenged. They might be very good at science, technology, engineering and maths, so STEM subjects. They might excel in arts and sport, but they might need stretching and challenging. They might need information presenting in different formats, so using things like mind maps might help this sort of student. And they might find some aspects of maths very easy, but others more difficult, so they might need support with things like number problems. And student D is a very typical student who will need close monitoring to ensure that they reach their full potential and don't just get forgotten in the middle of the class. So we would often refer to this type of student as the forgotten middle, because they just get on with things and they can cope with generally with things, but we need to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on this student. Now, the profiles that we've looked at are by no means an exhaustive list of Cat4 profiles. And if you want to sort of read more and find out more about different types of Cat4 profiles, we've just updated our Cat4 and the Strategies for Learning document, which is available on our website. So if you'd like to do some more reading, that's a really, really useful document in terms of understanding the different types of profiles and different strategies that work for those students. And it's based on a lot of research, and we will be running a webinar just on the Strategies for Learning on Wednesday the 25th of March. So if you are interested in looking at the strategies more, the documents there which you can read, and also we've got that webinar coming up next week. I'd also like to draw attention to our value added service. So this is particularly for those of you who work within the secondary or high school phase of education. So the value added service was launched a couple of years ago. And if you have Cat4 data and you've got IGCSE or IB diploma results for those students, then you can sign up to use the service currently at no extra cost. So we've partnered with the Fisher Family Trust, who've got a huge bank of results data, and this provides you a way to benchmark your school against other international schools and use the data to see areas where the school is doing well and identify areas for improvement. If you're interested in finding out more and you've got that data, then we've got a dedicated team, and you can contact them through the email address on the screen at the moment, and there's a few pages where you can sign up on our website as well. So now we move on to looking at assessing attainment. So we have our progress tests, which have been designed to be taken once a year, and they can be used to track year-on-year progress. They're available in English, maths and science, and they do align to the UK national curriculum. But we also have lots and lots of schools who use who are using the test who follow different curricula as well. So the tests are marked automatically and the reports are available to create within a few minutes of the test being completed. So from the teacher's point of view, it's really, really easy to administer and get some really useful feedback and data. So they can be used to share good practice. So some of the best schools that I've seen using progress tests, the team will sit down after the test's been taken, they'll share good practice. So they'll say, your class got some good results on that, mine didn't do so well on that, and they can actually share good practice about how they taught particular topics and actually then look at areas for development as well. So just to have a look at very briefly at each of the tests. So the progress test in English is available digitally from ages 7 through to 15. And there is also the paper version, which is available from 5 years old. And it assesses English skills. So it looks at spelling, punctuation and grammar. And it also has a reading comprehension sections. And it also looks at inference, retrieval and authorial technique as well. So that's covered across the range, the different levels of the progress test in English. For the progress test in maths, again, it's available digitally from age 7 to 15 and paper from 5 years old. From age 8, it also includes a 10-minute timed mental math section at the start, so you can get some idea of how well students respond to mental maths problems. And it also assesses their ability to work with number, algebra, geometry, proportional reasoning, statistics, and probability. And it also looks at their fluency. So how do they actually use the facts that have been presented? How can they use that in procedures and conceptual understanding and apply that with some mathematical reasoning and problem solving as well? So it's the application of what they know. So the progress test in science is slightly different, okay, in that it's available from age 8. It's felt that for the younger students, they might struggle with some of the concepts in science. So it starts at age 8 when they've got a bit more knowledge about science, through to 15. When you get to the secondary ages, so there isn't a test for the end of year 7. Or age 12, but there are 2 tests that you can choose from for the end of year 8 or year 9, depending on whether you are following a 2-year or a 3-year Key Stage 3 curriculum. So as well as questions which look at their knowledge of physics, chemistry and biology, it also has some questions which will assess students' ability to work scientifically. So what can you actually do with the results and how do you use the results from the tests? Okay, so here's an example from one of the group reports. Okay, so you can see that the scores are reported as a standard age score. So the progress test has been standardised in a similar way to we talked about for Cat 4. So we plot the results, get the normal distribution curve, and then we look at the results, and a score of 100 on the standard age score would indicate that the student has made typical progress for their age. Also, when you've got 2 subsequent results, so 2 different levels, e.g. You've got a level 10 result and a level 11 result, then a progress category would indicate whether they've made the same progress as the last test or whether they've made above average or below average when compared to that previous test result. You also get the in there the group ranking, so you can actually see where students are within the class. Now, again, one of the things that teachers feed back to us about the progress tests and why they love the progress tests and love using them, it's actually the very detailed reporting which they get back from the test. So you get question by question analysis, which allows you then to look at areas of strength, either as a class or as an individual. And you can also see the pointers. So we've got the implications for teaching and learning here, which are the pointers which give the teacher an idea of what the next steps need to be and planning how students can move forward. So these were designed to be taken once a year, every year, towards the end of the year. We are seeing schools moving that back a little bit so that they've got some time to work on some of those pointers that they need to, where the test has identified some gaps in learning. So particularly useful if you want to identify what students have done well, what they've actually missed, or what they need to work on to get to the next step. So how can we use the progress data, and how can we actually understand how well students are doing? And how can we identify those gaps in learning? So we've got an example here of 2 students, and we've got their progress test in math scores over 3 years. Now, if we just remember that a standard age score of 100 would be typical progress for the age of the student. Now, on first review, it looks as though the student Y has made the most progress. Okay, so they've gone from 90 to 100 to 110. So it looks that they're making the most progress. But actually, if we introduce the cognitive ability test scores, CAT4, and this is the quantitative reasoning score, we can see that student X, who has a CAT4 quantitative reasoning score of 94, has actually been achieving consistently above expectations. So they're just below 100, but consistently on the progress test they're achieving above 100. Whereas student Y is actually a very able student. At 135, they're in the top few percent of the population. So we should be, we would be expecting them to do very well. Now, in the first year, their performance was quite low at 90. It's moving in the right direction at 110 in the most recent test, but actually there's still a fair way to go with this student to actually get them to achieve at the level of their ability. Now, one of the things which I talk about a lot, and talking with schools who are using both CAT4 and progress tests, one of the things that I often find is that teachers are unaware of our combination reports. So combination reports can be used to provide a comparison between the student's ability from their CAT4 scores and compare that with their attainment in the progress tests in English and maths, and it also works with the new group reading test as well. So this can provide really valuable data to ensure that the student's making appropriate progress for their ability. So if you're using CAT4 and you're using progress tests, you can use combination reports. There's no extra cost involved in that. It's there. You can go in very quickly, create the combination report for your class, and then you've got that comparison. And this will actually then group students as to whether they're making expected progress compared to their ability, higher or lower, and it'll actually tell you different groups of students, so you can start to differentiate by grouping students and actually giving different activities to students as well. Now, if you'd like to find out more about using combination reports, there's a fantastic case study on our website which was written by Ian Hope, who's at the British School of Jakarta, and he talks about how they use these combination reports to work with their students on quite an individual program to support each student. And again, there's a commentary in the combination report which helps you understand different groups of students, and helps you to differentiate and put students into different groups, and provides pointers for planning the next steps with students as well. So again, something that teachers find really useful, that narrative that you get with the report as well. Okay, so I just want to draw your attention as well to Doddle. So Doddle is part of GL education, and Doddle provides online resources that can support lesson planning and high quality content for lessons as well. There's also engaging activities and quizzes to test students' knowledge. It's a great way for setting homework, and also there's lots of revision opportunities to help and support students prepare for exams. We've actually had a lot of interest in Doddle recently. Given the current situation around the world, a lot of schools have been looking at moving their learning online and supporting home learning, and there's a lot of resources within Doddle that can help you to do that. So we've recently run some webinars to support schools with moving their learning online at this difficult time. So if you'd like to find out a bit more about Doddle and how that can support learning at home, then please do get in touch with us. And as I mentioned, we've recently run a webinar, and it's a webinar recording on our website, which you can have a look through and find out about Doddle as well. Now, I'm going to move on now to look at another part of what we call the 360-degree view, or the whole student view of students. And we're going to look at barriers to learning and student well-being. Now, we tend to tell students, if you work hard, you do well at school, you'll get a great job, and then you'll have a happy life. Now, if we actually turn this on its head and actually think about how can we make students happy at school, they're more likely to be happy and successful at school, and then go on to do, a career which is something that they really want to do. So actually, if we support the happiness in school, then they're more likely to thrive and do well academically. So how can we support students with this? So we have the Pupils Attitude to Self and School Survey, or PASS. And this is a way that schools can see how their students are feeling about their experience in school. The survey was designed by a team of 6 psychologists from 3 different universities in the UK. It has 50 statements which students grade themselves against. So they'll say they agree, they're neutral, strongly disagree, and they'll grade themselves against those 50 statements. It's actually 27 for the younger students as well, so that's a little bit easier for the very young students because it's available from 4 years old through to sort of 17 plus. So the statements then, and this is the real power of the PASS survey, the statements are then combined and the responses are combined to give you scores on these 9 attitudinal measures. So you've got feelings about school, their perceived learning capability, their self-regard as a learner, how prepared they are for learning, attitudes to teachers, their general work ethic, their confidence in learning, their attitudes to attendance, and their response to the curriculum demands. Just to point out as well, for the younger students, because it's only 27 statements, it just covers 4 of these areas. But once you've got those, the students to actually go through, and it takes about 20 minutes for them to fill in the survey of the 50 statements. Once you've got that, you can then very quickly create the report and have a look at how they're feeling about their experience. So this is what one of the reports looks like. So you can see the results at the top here is for a whole cohort of students, but you can actually look at whole cohort, a year group, differences between gender and different ethnic groups if you want to. And the raw results at the top show the level of satisfaction for, in this case, a whole cohort. But the real power of PASS is in the standardised results, which compares your students' results with thousands of other students who've already completed the survey. And this will give you a percentile score, which indicates where your students are in comparison to all of the other students. So this will actually tell you whether a score is significant or not. So as you can see in this example, a raw score of 61 on preparedness for learning actually put this school in the lowest 5% of schools. So this might be an area as a whole school to do some more work. So we use this traffic light system, so you can very, very quickly identify areas for development. And if you see that it's green, then you don't need to worry, because the score is nothing to worry about. You can also look at individual student profiles, and the traffic light system again is a very, very quick way that you can identify individual students or group of students that would benefit from interventions. And this will give teachers and school counsellors pointers to students who they might want to have some further conversations with, to actually dig a little bit deeper into what are the issues that are concerning them. Now, again, question that's often asked is, well, yes, we've identified the students that we need to work with. What do we do next? So last year we launched our PASS interventions, which are available through our TestWise platform. So if you're using the PASS survey, you'll also have access to the PASS interventions. So these interventions have been tried and tested by international schools, and they provide suggested questions that you can ask at whole school level, class and individual level. So you can actually dig a little bit deeper as to what the issues are behind low scores. You've also then got suggested strategies to use that will help to improve, not just at student level, but a whole school and class level. And it helps teachers and school counsellors to discover what lies beneath the low scores and help them to provide interventions that will support students so that issues don't become big problems. Now, we've got quite a few case studies on our website looking at how different schools have used the PASS survey, but one that I'd particularly recommend that you have a look at is the GEMS Wellington School in Dubai, and they actually used their Cat4 data and their PASS data to identify what we refer to as fragile learners. So these are particularly able students whose own perceived learning capability is quite low, and therefore they're at risk of underachieving. So as I mentioned, if you want to read it a little bit more about using PASS and using Cat4 and PASS data, this is a really great case study to have a look at and find out more. Now, we've talked about ability data, we've talked about attainment data, and we've talked about data about students' attitudes. Now, how can we make a real impact in the classroom and for our students? So evidence from some of the most successful international schools shows that actually using student profiles to help teachers to get a better understanding of students works really, really well. And here's an example of a student profile where we've got Cat4 data, PASS data and progress data together so that the teacher can have a look at that whole student view. This example here is a very bright student. Okay, they've got obviously some issues because they're still learning English. English is a second language to them. Their English language is still developing, but they're a very bright, able student. We can see that actually their difficulties with English is actually impairing their performance in science. So science is one of those subjects where if it's taught in English, there's a lot of high-level English language. And if they're struggling with their English, they're probably going to struggle with the science. So this student is having those difficulties, and as a result, you can see that their own perceived learning capability is low, and their general work ethic is suffering because they're feeling, they're losing a little bit of hope in terms of working hard. So actually, if we can support their English language development and their overall attainment improves, then hopefully their feelings about school will improve. But it's having that whole information together that can help you understand and get that better picture of how best to support the student. And again, we've got some really great case studies on our website about how different schools have used student profiles and actually got the whole school using the data and understanding the data. This one on the screen at the moment is a particularly good one from the Beijing City International School, and it talks about how they've used student profiles so that they can share that data with all staff and they can all see how students are doing. And another really good one to have a look at is from the Riverside School in Prague as well. So if you want to find out more and look at how other schools have used student profiles, those are a couple of great case studies. So we're coming towards the end of the main section now. So just to sort of look back at some of the things that we've talked about and why schools use standardised assessment. So they provide a really reliable and fair way to compare your students with other similar students around the world. They can help to identify gifted and talented students as well as those who would benefit from some more targeted support, such as students who are studying English as a second language, or students who might have other learning support needs. They can provide a baseline on entry and help you to set some appropriate targets. And remember, assessment should improve learning, and feedback and metacognition can have a big impact on the teaching and learning. So just to sort of wrap things up towards the end now, and you know, thinking about if you want to find out more, we've got some great support on our website. There are further webinars, videos, case studies on our website, which you can have a look at. We've got a great support team here, so if you do want to get in touch, please get in touch via the email on the screen at the moment, and put something in your subject line so that we know what the query is about, so we can direct it to the best person. For our existing schools, we're planning to run some data clinics later in April, where you'll be able to send a cohort or class of data to us for review, and then we'll discuss that in a follow-up video call and talk about what the data actually shows you. So if you are interested in those data clinics, again, drop an email into international@ealeducation.com with data clinics in the subject line, and then we'll pick that up. If you're new to our assessments, then please do get in touch, because we can provide some free trials so that you can actually try the assessments for yourselves and see how that works for your students. Okay, now I have overrun very, very slightly on time, but we were a little bit late getting started. But I'm now going to pass back to Andy, and I think we've got some time to pick up any questions which might have come through during the session.